All right, Idealistas, we stopped on page 523. Harry had just ran into or found Malfoy in the bathroom and he was crying, and Malfoy saw Harry and they started to fight. And Harry threw a spell at him, and now Malfoy's like covered in blood. And that's where we stopped reading. So I'm going to start at the top of page 523. It says, "No, I didn't." Harry did not know what he was saying. He fell to his knees beside Malfoy, who was shaking uncontrollably in a pool of his own blood. Moaning Myrtle let out a deafening scream. "Murder! Murder in the bathroom! Murder!" The door banged open behind Harry, and he looked up, terrified. Snape had burst into the room, his face livid. Pushing Harry roughly aside, he knelt over Malfoy, drew his wand, and traced it over the deep wounds Harry's curse had made, muttering an incantation that sounded almost like song. The flow of blood seemed to ease. Snape wiped the residue from Malfoy's face and repeated his spell. Now the wounds seemed to be knitting. Harry was still watching, horrified by what he had done. Barely aware that he too was soaked in blood and water, Moaning Myrtle was still sobbing and wailing overhead. When Snape had performed his counter curse for the third time, he half lifted Malfoy into a standing position. "You need the hospital, Wing. There may be a certain amount of scarring, but if you take Dittany immediately, we might avoid even that. Come." He supported Malfoy across the bathroom, turning at the door to say in a voice of cold fury, "And you, Potter, you wait here for me." It did not occur to Harry for a second to disobey. He stood up, slowly, shaking, and looked down at the wet floor. There were bloodstains floating like crimson flowers across its surface. He could not even find it in himself to tell Moaning Myrtle to be quiet. And as she continued to wail and sob with increasingly evident enjoyment. Snape returned 10 minutes later. He stepped into the bathroom and closed the door behind him. "Go," he said to Myrtle, as she swooped back into her toilet, and at once, leaving a ringing silence behind her. I didn't mean it to happen," said Harry at once, his voice echoing in the cold, watery space. "I didn't know what the spell did." But Snape ignored this. "Apparently, I underestimated you, Potter," he said quietly. "Who would have thought you knew such dark magic? Who taught you that spell?" "I read about it somewhere." "Where?" "It was a library book," Harry invented wildly. "I can't remember what it was called." "Liar," said Snape. Harry's throat went dry. He knew that Snape was going to do, and he had never been able to prevent it. The bathroom seemed to shimmer before his eyes. He struggled to block out all the thought, but try as he might, the Half-Blood Prince's copy of Advanced Potion Making swam hazily to the forefront of his mind. And then he was staring at Snape again, in the midst of his wrecked, soaked bathroom. He stared into Snape's black eyes, hoping against hope that Snape had not seen what he feared, but... "Bring me your school bag," said Snape softly, "and all of your school books, all of them. Bring them to me here, now." There was no point arguing. Harry turned at once and splashed out of the bathroom. Once in the corridor, he broke into a run toward Gryffindor Tower. Most people were walking the other way. They gaped at him, drenched in water and blood, but he answered none of the questions fired at him as he ran past. He felt stunned. It was as though a beloved pet had turned suddenly savage. What had the prince been thinking to copy such a spell into his book? And what would happen if Snape saw it? Would he tell Slughorn? Harry's stomach churned. How Harry had been achieving such good results in potions all year. How Harry had been achieving, I don't know. Would he confiscate or destroy the book that had taught Harry so much? The book that had become a kind of guide and friend. Harry could not let it happen. He could not. Why are you soaking? Is that blood? Ron was standing at the top of the stairs looking bewildered at the sight of Harry. I need your book, Harry panted. Your potions book. Quick, give it to me. But what about the half-blood? I'll explain later. Ron pulled his copy of Advanced Potions making out of his bag and handed it over. Harry sprinted off past him and back to the common room. Here, he seized his school bag, ignoring the amazed looks of several people who had already finished their dinner, threw himself back out of the portrait hole, and hurtled off along the 7th floor corridor. He skipped to a halt beside the tapestry of dancing trolls, closed his eyes, and began to walk. I need a place to hide my book. I need a place to hide my book. I need a place to hide my book. All right, that's the end of 525. Let's just look and see what our question is for today. I hope that it's the prediction one, because I think you could have a really good prediction for what's going to happen next. He's walking along the 7th floor corridor. That's usually where he goes when he's looking for something. And it just says what your favorite part is. Okay, so go ahead and write down what your favorite part of the story was today. Okay, it will be posted in Google Classroom. All right, have a good day.